Hi friends, I'm Shauna. Welcome to the channel. It's been a hot minute since we've talked about no-buy or conscious consumer type subject matter. I think it's actually been 3 weeks since I brought a video of that nature to the channel. We're gonna be rectifying that today, and this is gonna be a long one. So strap in. I don't know, maybe watch this while you're doing the dishes or something, because this is gonna be a long video. Now, what got this whole video going is a belief that I'm going to be exploring and kind of pulling apart a little bit, which is somebody who believes that they're better than somebody else because they shop less. So we're really going to be talking about morals and judgments and how we attach those to shopping. And so it does revolve around no-buy, conscious consumer, and kind of minimalist spaces, but we're going to be talking a lot about judgment and materialism and consumption and their intersection. I think this is going to be a really juicy video, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. When I first started my no-buy in 2020, I had not explicitly thought about or made a video about morality or its role in my own views about shopping. And that really didn't stop me from having beliefs, because when we have beliefs and values, sometimes even if they are unspoken, they still form our opinions and how we think about the world around us as well as ourselves. And because I hadn't expressed this belief, it went unchecked, and it led to a lot of judgment on my part. At the time, when I started my no-buy in 2020, I held a belief that makes me uncomfortable now because of how judgmental it was. I essentially believed that I was better than other people in the beauty community because I was on a no-buy. I was better than people who weren't on a no-buy. I was trying to change my shopping habits, so it was like I was woke. I knew better, and I had woken up to my toxic behavior and the toxic parts of the beauty community. I had woken up to the fact that I was over-consuming, and that consumer culture is deeply flawed and problematic. At the time, I remember watching a haul video and going to read the comments. And after seeing those two, I remember thinking to myself, wow, these people are sheep. They don't know any better. That was incredibly condescending, and it made me feel better about the choices that I was making because I felt morally superior. And I want to talk a little bit more about this view, and as I do, I'm not trying to let myself off the hook by saying that my attitude was okay because I found cultural or social ideas that form the basis of my belief. It's cool to understand where your beliefs come from and maybe helpful for you to deal with them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're okay. The view that I highlighted above, the one, feeling morally superior, I believe stems from this juxtaposition in our culture where stuff and wealth are status. There's different kinds of stuff that confer status and signal status. Like owning a home and owning a car are a certain kind of status. It could also be owning a specific kind of car that signals a different status or another level of status. But status can also mean owning a lot of something. And it's the quantity that really matters here. And you might think that owning $22 blushes is not really a flex, or really the same thing as owning $80 blushes. And while maybe neither of these people are trying to flex on anybody intentionally, overconsumption communicates things at all times, or really consumption communicates things at all times. And we're usually aware at some level as to what that communication means. Just because someone can afford the $65 or $80 blush doesn't negate somebody's desire for power or control or wealth. And a lot of people will do that where they can. Aspiration in life as well can come from consumption. For a lot of people, owning a home, just owning a home in itself, means that they've made it, and it's an aspirational type of purchase. Or owning a certain kind of car can mean that they've made it. Same thing with a particular kind of handbag. This doesn't have to mean that people are aspiring to own these things as status symbols, or that the social context or the cultural context is the only reason, the exclusive reason, or the major reason. Personal meaning can overshadow cultural context or cultural meaning and value, or I guess more like cultural symbolizing. Some people can dream their entire life of owning a Porsche, and that has really intense personal meaning that somebody has built up over time. I've actually heard this a lot with men, and not just like any car, but like specifically Porsches. And it's this meaning of, when I make it someday, I'll have this. Or to me, making it or having the good life, having a life that I'm proud of or happy, can mean owning this thing. That has really intense personal meaning. But what is viewed as the making it item or the thing that really symbolizes to the person that they've made it can shift over time as well. Because buying a house in 2022 does not mean the same thing as it did in 1972. Owning wealth and things that symbolize wealth matters to most people. High-powered careers can mean that too. If we don't care about wealth or owning money, most of us wouldn't be trying to advance our careers, earn more money, or have desires to own better things, to own a better home or a more expensive home or car or appliance, or even buying things that are more expensive over time. So many of us buy the $20 wine now, like if let's say you're into alcohol, we'll buy the $20 wine now, but if you earned more money, you might buy the $100 bottle of wine. So many of us go into debt for buying nicer things. However, the minute that we express the desire for nicer things or more expensive things that are beyond the basic need, or really anything beyond the basic need, it seems that wanting to have those things makes you materialistic. So our society puts up this expectation, this demand, and driving people to want them. You literally can't turn anywhere from imaging and marketing and advertising about buying stuff and living the good life, whatever that means. Yet we're shamed when we go to buy those exact same things. And that's what I meant about the juxtaposing imagery in just a couple minutes ago. And it just seems that wanting those things in general, and most especially when you buy them, makes you a bad person and makes you materialistic. And it's the materialism that makes you the bad person. Materialism is not seen as a favorable trait or attribute almost across the board. This is a juxtaposition because we want things, but then often feel guilty for buying them or for desiring them. And society tells us that we should buy them, but then we get shamed and name calling for doing it. Materialism is used as an insult at other people. It's thrown at other people all the time. She's materialistic. He's materialistic. Like, how dare they? Almost like other things, like calling other people condescending. It always across the board has negative implication, or to use to other people negatively with a negative intention. And materialism and somebody being materialistic is another way for people to judge other people. And it's a reason in itself for people to dislike other people. And it's a way for people to feel better about themselves and morally superior. Now, turning a little bit more to materialism explicitly, if you're called materialistic, there are almost no redeeming qualities to somebody who's materialistic, and so much is associated with materialism or being a materialistic person. People who are materialistic are often viewed as shallow, vain, of low morals or low moral standing, superficial, maybe even dumb, because like you don't know any better, or like you'd have to be stupid to think that way. And also this like assumption that you value things over people, which in itself is seen as bad. And there just doesn't seem to be any redeeming qualities. A study done by Berkeley found that people who are materialistic do tend to be less happy than those who aren't. And there are reasons for that. People who value material goods, or let's just call it stuff, spend more time chasing stuff as a form of happiness and fulfillment instead of finding fulfillment and happiness with other people. There's a constant need to buy new things to get that dopamine hit, like there's never enough, and relying on buying things as a form of happiness, which means that happiness literally depends on stuff. And you can get caught in this hamster wheel chasing your own happiness, especially if your desire for life is to be happy. Your baseline of stuff, let's say you had 5 pairs of jeans or 20 pairs of shoes, that eventually becomes not enough. And then you need more, and your baseline slowly raises over time. You're focusing on stuff instead of other things, and there is never or rarely an appreciation for what you have because of that desire for more, which can truly be bottomless. The Berkeley study often talks about this lack of gratitude. They write that people are materialistic to the extent that they place acquiring possessions at the center of their lives. They judge success by the number and quality of one's possessions and see these possessions as vital to happiness. Now, before we go further, I want to insert a little bit of a caveat here. Happiness is a superficial emotion and usually surrounds pleasure, almost exclusively surrounds pleasure, and it comes from external influence. I have an entire video dedicated on happiness and contentment. I love that video and I've rewatched it several times myself. I get the larger point that is being made by the Berkeley study, and they make great points, most especially about gratitude, which I'll continue in just a second. And so the larger point is that whatever label that you want to call it, and looking to stuff to validate ourselves or our lives isn't a good thing. However, people who criticize other people for who look to stuff for happiness, I think they maybe miss the point here a little bit about happiness, what it is and what it means. I'm not here trying to play semantics to say that no, it's actually contentment and not happiness for the sake of verbiage or language. I bring this up because when I learned the difference between happiness and contentment, it changed my perspective and validated what I wanted out of life and what that would feel like. And I also stopped feeling so guilty for finding happiness in the superficial. It is perfectly acceptable to find happiness in stuff like a great meal or a really great dress, because again, that is what happiness actually means. Is pleasure, and pleasure coming from external circumstances. What is less okay, and what I think the ultimate point here is, if stuff becomes your whole world, or maybe if your focus is on happiness and chasing that and chasing dopamine, like that hit after hit after hit, without considering contentment or having anything in your life that brings you contentment, chasing happiness over contentment as well. Anyways, let's continue. What the Berkeley study found is that what is noticeable about materialistic people are their low levels of gratitude, and ultimately materialism undermines our pursuit of happiness. I'm going to say contentment. Now, the Berkeley study is I think ultimately giving us a warning about gratitude. We have control over whether we will put stuff in the center of our lives or not, or use it as a metric of success or not. And you can still be materialistic without making stuff your entire life. I'm not making a claim as to that's good or bad or desirable or not. Even if materialistic people could find ways to be more grateful for what they have, society would still find ways to judge and villainize them. And it's just not that simple, because as Sirius Black once said to Harry, the world is not split into good people and Death Eaters. The distinction of materialism is not black and white. Most people have the streak of materialism with them to some degree. But the difference is that we tend to justify our materialism as okay because we're not the Kardashians or because we're not Jeff Bezos. And I think a lot of people view things in extremes. Materialism is only materialism when you, etc. When you start buying $10,000 bags, when you start buying homes with more rooms than people or whatever. And so there are extremes, and we'll say to ourselves, because I'm not that, I'm okay. And so we justify our position and our choices by comparing them to other people and by judging other people. We will say to ourselves, we might live in a rented condo or have a lease on a car, or we might have a 3-bedroom house in Wisconsin with 5 kids, and maybe feel a little bit weird about that. And then the way we feel secure or better about our choices is by saying like, oh, look at her. She thinks she's better than us by having a designer handbag, or we'll call this person stuck up or shallow because this X thing, and we'll compare our values with other people. I love my family, and like no amount of handbags would make me happy. I remember this moment where my mom and I went into a hospital to go see somebody, and my aunt, like my biological dad's sister-in-law, she was there. And my mom hadn't seen her at that point, probably like a decade at least. So after my mom and I left the hospital, we're in the car, my mom turns to me and she says, Shauna, did you see her dangling her Tiffany bracelet at me? My mom called her by her name, but like, I'm not going to call her out here. She follows it up with, she thinks that she's better than us because she buys Tiffany and that she has to feel good about herself by flaunting it at me. I don't need a Tiffany bracelet to be happy. It's sad that she feels like she needs that. Comments like this happen all of the time. There's a lot of judgment going on in that comment, which like we could probably be here for 10 minutes unpacking it. And there's a lot of assumptions going on there. Often we assume the values and intentions of materialistic people. We might be right, but a lot of that assuming comes from our own need to validate our own position, our own place in life, or communities that we're a part of. Now listen, this is not a not all rich people kind of situation. No. I do want to say here that you don't have to be rich to be materialistic. And I'm also not sympathizing with the rich. Like I can make an hour-long video about the relationship between rich people, generational wealth, capitalism. Like that's just a video for a different time. What I am saying is that our assumptions about materialistic people often say way more about us than it does about them. Just about anything, materialism can get into extremes, but we also don't need to feel shitty about ourselves for enjoying material items, point blank. And in the hospital example, my mom assumed that that bracelet was Tiffany, that my aunt was jangling it at her, that jangling was significant, and or a taunt of some kind, that my aunt feels superior than my mom and I because she has name brands, and that name brand means something. And my mom also took it as a sign of materialism in general, therefore assuming that my aunt is materialistic and uses the same symbols in meetings that my mom does. We could go on and on. I've assumed that people who haul makeup all the time or who are over consumers are insecure, maybe even that they're not smart or that they're shallow or whatever, when in reality I was that person. Like I was the over consumer. I had a surprising lack of empathy and consideration and critical thinking on my part because I judged those people so quickly. I judged people that I didn't know and made assumptions to help me validate myself and help me get through a tough moment. I had a lot of guilt and shame and embarrassment about my consuming behavior, and judging people helped me distance myself from who I didn't want to be. My moral superiority factors into that as well. I really don't want to be that. And I was even ashamed of being that. And therefore, because I'm not that, I'm better than you. After some of the haze of the early part of the no-buy had lifted, it became less important to me to care about how other people shopped and what they were doing with their money or their makeup collections. I stopped caring what I thought it said about other people. And a large reason for that was because I felt more content and secure in my own choices. The judgment was necessary for a little while to help me cope in the transition. Stuff is status. Big homes, nice cars, a lot of stuff. And even the American dream is built on materialism and capitalism. And how we justify or conceive materialism will likely change, or my belief is that it changes based on our situation, how much money we have, how many people that we know, or our time and place in life. A lot of us do want nicer things and aspire to have nicer things. If you won $10 million, what would you buy? Probably a lot of the things that we would peg materialistic people for wanting in the first place. Maybe you'd give to charity, maybe you'd be that kind of person, maybe you'd help your relatives, etc. But I bet you something on your list would be something that you've said is materialistic. If we value wealth and therefore material possessions, if we view them in our heart as status or as important in some kind of way, then I think we would view people who have those things as better than us in some capacity. We might even be jealous that they have the things that we want for ourselves. And so if we saw somebody who had the thing that we want, we'll talk beauty community people here, let's say Jaclyn Hill or Jackie Aina or Manny MUA. They all have brands. In order to prove that they're not better than us or we're just as good as they are, we highlight alternative values and or judge them for theirs, even if we share some overlapping of those. People hate on Jaclyn Hill's materialism. She's done closet tours as an example, and she's also made videos, and you can see her wealth in her stories or Snapchats. Her stuff has been on display. And her materialism is a contributing factor for why people don't like her and why people consider her a bad person. Sure, people might still hate her or dislike her if she didn't have the money that she did, but made the choices that she's made. I don't think a lot of people would ever forgive her for Lipstick Gate. But we just tack on materialism as this way to assassinate her character even further. Conspicuous consumption plays a role in the reason why a lot of people consume in the first place as well. Conspicuous consumption is consumption, so buying things, not for necessity, but for the status these goods communicate. This is usually meant to apply to luxury goods like watches, purses, and cars, but because of aspirational consumption habits and the desire to communicate status more generally, people still consume non-luxury items in conspicuous ways. According to the Financial Times, about 65% of the British economy and even more of the American economy, so more than 65% in the United States, is directed not at procuring the basics of life, such as food and shelter and physical comforts, but at carrying out a range of social functions. Carrying out a range of social functions is conspicuous consumption. Material accumulation today serves mostly to satisfy non-material wants, be it the esteem and consideration of others or the expression of personal identity. Shiny watches are worn not to tell the time, but to tell others about one's social standing. I think that there's a lot of people who are resistant to this idea that like they're not materialistic or that they don't value material or status at all. And I've been one of those people at some points. And like people want to be outside of the norm or like social theories. If that's you, if that's truly in your heart, good for you. If it's not and you're denying it to yourself, I'm sorry. If you're like, yeah, I know that that's me, great. Why do we care that our homes are outdated? iPhones are popular in North America for reasons beyond the operating system. Would you really care what phone you had if nobody could ever see it? Like if you ever pulled it out, nobody could ever tell what phone you have. Is the camera really that different between the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 13 or 13 and 14, whatever number we're at? It is so popular to hate on Android and PCs as well. And now there's people who also hate on Mac and like Apple products, and they refuse to buy them because of the sole factor that they believe most people who like Apple are sheeps. People who hate on either one usually have very little substance for their distaste. Conspicuous consumption usually applies to the type of goods one desires or buys, as well as the price, but the quantity of goods is just as communicative. One of the things the original theorist of conspicuous consumption, Thorstein Veblen, was interested in was conspicuous leisure and conspicuous waste. Conspicuous waste is a scheme of properties, decencies, and standards of living, the economic motive of which is competitive spending. In essence, buying things and wasting resources that you have no real need for. This can be buying something of the absurd variety, like a gold-plated $5,000 pepper grinder, or buying your 100th blush. These purchases demonstrate your wealth, especially your disposable income. You have so much money that you can afford to buy things in excess. This does play out in the beauty community. And while some may have felt morally superior or better than others because of their wokeness, others might have felt morally superior because of their ability to buy in excess and how much they own and the fact that they can buy it. Or just the fact that they own it in general. There's a lot of PR going out there too. I believe that we hold knowledge paradigms or ways of knowing that give us the most power or make us feel the most empowered based on our circumstances. We can see this play out in small ways of thinking, like if you believe in one circumstance, everything happens for a reason, and then in another circumstance, say, I hold my own power or I'm in control of my own life and choices. We often say things to confirm our beliefs and worldviews that we already have, even if sometimes the way that we think is inconsistent. If you're involved in the beauty community, being part of the community is likely important to you, and participating in the habits and behaviors of the community was or is meaningful, I should say. We might have bought onto the idea of retail therapy, or excuse drunk buying something, or thought, oh my God, the ha ha ha, take my money, or the Target memes were so funny and quirky because they're relatable. Or maybe we think it's like really cool to own every single Natasha Denona palette or every single ABH palette, or shopping the Sephora sale, or that in order to be like a real beauty enthusiast, you have to own Alex drawers. We believe in things that allow us to feel in control of our choices and condone them at the same time. People who are on no-buys or are conscious consumers or minimalists might view the very behavior that I just mentioned as problematic or toxic or just undesirable as a whole. The people who are, let's say, in the conscious consumer type sphere or minimalist sphere, no-buy sphere, run an alternative form of cultural capital, where condoning that very behavior would cost them social currency and likely result in judgment. She's not really a minimalist. Minimalists can't do this. You're not really on a no-buy if you do this. We espouse knowledge paradigms that support our self-empowerment and life choices, even if those things are illusion or they're inconsistent. And also, cultural capital exists and affects our lives. Depending on the communities we want to be involved in, the cultural capital varies. According to Pierre Bourdieu, cultural capital is familiarity with a legitimate culture within a society. He was referring to high culture, like museums, like highbrow culture. Museums, ballet, fine art, good manners, etc. But cultural capital exists within sub-communities as well. People will often turn to the sub-community to validate themselves, their experiences, when larger culture doesn't accept or condone them, or they can't find value and meaning in them, or they're being judged by them. So subcultures have their own specific set of behaviors, actions, and norms. Within minimalist circles, knowing who all the important authors are, that's a form of cultural capital. Or owning a 20-piece capsule wardrobe, that's a form of cultural capital. Knowing who has the best hauls, or having, let's say, a 300-piece makeup collection would cost us in these circles. I began to feel morally superior to other people back in 2020 because in part my values changed, and I was now coming into a new knowledge paradigm that I sought to validate, and I was coming into a new way of thinking that I wanted to validate. I was also joining a new community where different cultural capital existed. And communities often other people outside of their community to validate their existence, and worldviews inside of their own community. by calling other people sheep or materialistic does validate the views that somebody might have in a no-buy community. Cultural capital is very important because it affords a sense of belonging and group cohesion, and it also reinforces norms. An example would be if I went into a minimalist circle and saying that I'm a minimalist, but capsule wardrobes suck, or trying to undermine sacred minimalist principles, and people started agreeing with me, I'd be a threat to the power dynamics that have emerged within minimalist communities. People who have a lot of cultural capital within those communities could all of a sudden lose it overnight if it changed. And that's why I think a lot of people outside of communities feel judged by them. Like people who are not minimalists feel judged by minimalists and have then gone on to declare their intentions, that they're a maximalist or like minimalism is so stupid. There are counters to minimalists. There are maximalists out there who feel the need to espouse their beliefs loudly because they feel judged by minimalists. Maybe minimalists have judged them openly. Sometimes people feel like they need to, put somebody outside of their circle down a peg because they're just out there proselytizing or criticizing, but it feels like you yourself are being criticized and judged, and therefore your worldview and your choices, and it becomes really personal. Now, I'm really inclined to say, let's let people make their own choices and let's stop judging them. Very much a me thing to say, and I'm not saying that I'm above judgment because I do catch myself judging other people, and I think that there's room for improvement. I'm not better than somebody else who likes to haul makeup or is more materialistic than me. At most, I think that we have different values, and that is okay. But often in our minds, subconsciously, it's not, because those alternative values threaten how we perceive ourselves, our cultural or social capital, our choices, etc. They are threats to us in our mind, and we can feel really judged by that. Some of the needs we have, such as the need to self-affirm, I really want to say are natural, but I'm really hesitant to call anything natural because the way that power operates is to normalize and naturalize something. And anyways, we'll just say I'm calling it natural with caution. I'm more materialistic than certain family members, but I am less judgmental than those family members. That difference means something to me specifically because of my own values, just like that other person being less minimalistic values means something to them. Consumer culture is messy and complicated, and we live in this weird cultural moment with mixed messages and contradicting messages about consumption, wealth, materialism, and status. And we also live in a world that is incredibly beautiful because there are so many subcultures and different kinds of people out there. And I learn things from people all the time that are outside of my comfort zone, things that I haven't questioned before, different subcultures and subgenres. But I also do feel threatened by other ones and have gotten my back up or then felt the need to judge other people. And both of those things live together. Now, I would like to make a video about the Society of the Spectacle, kind of taking guide boards. I say that so like English. Talking about guide board spectacle and like bringing it into the conscious consumer minimalist no-buy space, shopping space. I think that would be really fun and interesting. I feel like, what the fuck is that? It's cool. I think it can be fun. So I don't want to talk too much more about consumer culture without getting too much into the Society of the Spectacle kind of content. What I will leave you with is that nobody is outside of consumer culture. Nobody. Everybody is impacted by it, and it influences them in different ways. We can control, or maybe we can consider how we judge other people, why we judge them, and we can think about why or what our judgment says about us and what we value. That is it from me today. We talked about a lot. I'm hoping that the connections between these things are clear. If not, leave them in the comments. We can talk about it. I can't believe I got to talk about conspicuous consumption as well as distinction in the same video. and like hinted at guide. If you would like to talk more about distinction or society and the spectacle, leave that in the comments. If you don't, also leave that in the comments. Because if nobody says anything, I'm just gonna make it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Thanks for chatting with me. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for watching. And I hope to see you again around here soon. Bye.